Hey, hello class, folks that are in Joshua class. I just figured I would do a short little video kind of walking through this week's material. Hopefully that will help you along this week. So the first thing that you need to do in Google Classroom is come to your Joshua class. Right here, and please always hit classwork right in the middle. It could be at the bottom of your screen right there. Because this stream is super confusing, especially if you're in Joshua, because all of the assignments from the entire series, Bible Heroes, is there. So go to classwork, and you finished week 14. Hopefully all of these should be grayed out, and this week is week 15. And so I retitled these 15.1, 15.2, 15.3, so that all the way down, hopefully that will be easier for you to follow along. And I just realized that I never changed this one, so that is now fixed. Also, each one has a particular due date. So the very first thing that you should do is open up your memory verse. And this week's memory verse is in Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. It's a great verse. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened. Do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. So what I need you to do for this verse, just like usual, is to copy it down on a note card. I also want you to type in here as a private comment, what is the context of this verse? So you read about this verse last week because it's in Joshua chapter 1. So just open up your Bible, Joshua 1, look to see what's going on in chapter 9. Here's the verse. This is my command. So what is he telling you? This is actually, as you can see this, it is the second verse from what you memorized last week. So you can thank me for not making you memorize two. Some of the other groups had to memorize two. So you need to write down what is the context of this particular verse, and then what does this verse mean to you? Oh, shoot. What does this verse mean to you? And I want you to type it as well. So you're going to be writing it on a note card as well as typing it in. I want you to do it twice, just because that helps with memory. What you're going to be learning this week is we're going to be looking at God, and is God a fighter or is he a lover? Is Jesus a fighter or is he a lover? Sometimes you may have heard that statement. Is he a lover or a fighter? So we're going to kind of look at that. And at the end of the week, you're going to answer a really interesting question that is it possible for a loving God to instill rules of war? But I want you to read and watch a video before you do that. So after you do the memory verse, then you open this one up and you have a reading assignment. And as you can see, I want you to read Joshua chapter 6 through 12. Now, real quick, I'm going to do a recap on the chapters of Joshua, because we've seen that God is leading the Israelites. This is right after Moses, so God is charging Joshua, saying, you are now the leader, as well as charging the Israelites to stay with him. In the second chapter of Joshua was the really cool story about Rahab, how God used her. There is a really cool video that's going to come next week that talks about the walls, and it says that that Rahab lived in the walls of the city, and you're going to get to see how that actually played out and how that was possible. So that's the story of Rahab and how she protected the spies, and God allowed her to stay alive, and she became a figure in the line of Jesus. So that was really cool. Then the Israelites, they crossed the Jordan. There's this really cool, they set up 12 stones as a memorial, just like how we've seen many times in the Bible where Abraham, Noah, and Joseph, and Jacob, they all at one point in time created an altar and made an altar to God after a really cool experience. So that's what's happening right here. Take 12 stones, and each one of those represented the 12 tribes. And then in Joshua chapter 5, there is this reestablishment of the covenant and this super cool story right here. When Joshua was near the town of Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and demanded, are you a friend or are you a foe? And he said, neither one. I am the commander of the Lord's army. At this, Joshua fell with his face to the ground in reverence and said, I am at your command. What do you want your servant to do? The commander of the Lord's army replied, take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy. Does that sound familiar? Maybe you're thinking, I've heard that somewhere before. It is when Moses encountered God at the burning bush. God said, take off your sandals, where you're staying is holy ground. Some scholars really believe that this commander of the Lord's army could have, in fact, been Jesus in flesh. And then you start with Joshua chapter 6, and this is where they are about to go into the city. So it's really cool that this commander of the Lord's army, or this maybe it was an angel, somebody that was for God, came and encouraged Joshua and said, hey, I'm with you, and you are going to be so amazed at how you're going to take this city. And so then this week you're going to read chapter 6, and this is the main chapter that I want you to focus on this week, but I do want you to continue reading all the way through chapter 12. You can see right here, Joshua 6 through 12. Now you do have a reading assignment. That's just going to show me that you did actually do your reading. And your reading assignment is actually going to be a storyboard only on chapter 6 because it's such an important chapter. If you open up this PDF, I have already put in here that this is the text that I want you to complete this storyboard on, and I have put in the exact verses. So here's the story of maybe that was Jesus that appeared to Joshua. And then what happens here in the first 7 verses, what happens here in verses 8 to 14, 15 to 23, and then the last part of that chapter. And please don't forget to do a life lesson. That's super important. So that's what you're going to do for the reading assignment. This I just added just a second ago because I noticed this is a little video. If you read chapter 6 and you're still a little bit confused, this video right here is going to help. It's 2 minutes long. And it talks about the walls of Jericho falling down. So you can check that out if you want. It's not required. The first day, on Monday or Tuesday, whatever your day 1 is, so Monday for everybody except for 7th period, Joshua folks, please complete at least 15.1 and 15.2. You do that, you'll be good and on track. The second thing, or the third thing that I want you to do the next day when you come in is the video assignment. Now, this video assignment is probably going to take the entire day too. You are going to watch this attached video. It's actually audio only. This right here is the exact same as this. I put them both in there just in case one did not pop up very well on your iPads. So you're going to need to watch one of these. This is a message given from New Spring Fuse Student Ministry, which is our student ministry, and it was a really good message, and I remembered it. It was from several years ago, but when I was creating this Joshua curriculum, I thought this is a really good message. Take the land. It's all about when Joshua comes and takes Canaan and that land. So watch that or listen to it, and then you're going to need to complete a dialectical journal. And just a reminder, as you're watching it, if something sparks your attention or you're like, oh, that was really cool, or I don't really understand what he said there, then you're going to write that right here. This is sort of the quote, or this is when he said da 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 da, and you don't really have to do anything here. You can write what time it is. Typically, if you were going to cite something in a video, that's what you would do. You would cite the time. And then you need to have at least 3 things right here that are interesting or questionable about this verse right here that you, verse or quote rather, that you heard. So I want you to listen to the entire sermon, and you're only going to pull out 3 particular points. Now what's neat about the sermon is they usually walk through and will offer multiple points that you could easily take from, but I want you to expand upon those. That should be your day 2 of work in Joshua. Then the next day that you come in is day 3, and this is the day that you're going to need to finish up the work. You'll have 2 more things to do. The form post, which is just a question, as well as these worksheet assignments. Usually you do the form post first. However, Joshua only, it says in order to answer this question, you must have already answered the first and second questions on the handout, Holy Wars. All right, so this is the other reason why I'm doing this video. Open up the worksheet assignment, and this one right here is called Holy Wars. So you will have to complete both of these before the end of the week. And this first question is, how was Israel's battle at Jericho different from the typical battle in a traditional war? Hopefully after reading chapter 6, you can see how it was very different. They just had trumpets, and they shouted, and they walked around a certain number of times, very different than what a typical war would look like. You can think back to what a traditional war looked like way back then, or you can compare it to a traditional war in 2019 and what wars look like today. Anyway, give several examples there. And then the second question is read the selections below from Deuteronomy 7 to find out what rules God sets for the conquest of Canaan. All right, so this is in Deuteronomy 7. Remember, this is Moses giving this speech to the Israelites, telling them, remember what God has brought you through. Remember to love him and put him first always. But then there's also this section where he says, you will eventually take the land of Canaan. That's the Holy Land promised you. That's the whole reason I brought you out of Egypt. And this is the rules that you're going to need to do it. And so he gives them 5 rules right here. When the Lord brings you to the land, you're entering it, drive out the nations. So you're going to read through these. And then on this particular worksheet, you'll explain, did they destroy everybody totally at Jericho? And then you'll have to look at chapter 8, which you remember you've already read because you've read 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. That's 7 chapters, but they're not that long. You should have done that on the first day this week. So look back at chapter 6 and 7, or just 6, and then chapter 8 to see what they did at Ai. And then here's a couple other questions that you will need to answer as well. But when you answer those first 2 questions on the Holy War, you'll be able to answer this form question. And here's the question. Is it possible for a loving God to set the types of holy war rules found in Deuteronomy chapter 7? All right, so we just looked at some of these rules. Oh, I lost it. We just looked at some of these rules. Can a loving God say wipe out everybody, like even the children and the babies? And can a loving God do that? Why or why not? Then I also want you to think about Jesus. Is Jesus also loving as well as just? And there are 2 verses, Revelation 19, 11 to 16, and Colossians 2:15. So you will need to look those up. And as you can see, I just quickly copied and pasted it, put it in here, and there it is. In this way, he disarmed the spiritual rulers and authorities. He shamed them publicly by his victory over them on the cross. Now, I always like to find the context, so I want to see exactly who they're talking about. I know it's Jesus, but I'm showing you how I do that. And here's verse 15, and here talking about, this is Paul writing to the Colossians, and he's talking about Christ, who forgave our sins. He canceled the record. So God, or Jesus, is disarming the spiritual rulers and authorities. So how does that show that Jesus is also a warrior? This is super cool that Jesus is the Greek rendering of the Hebrew name Joshua, which means the Lord saves. So I just want you to think about Jesus and then think about what you know so far about Joshua, and do you see any similarities? Now, you do need to answer this. I said in at least 3 sentences. I do know that there's more than 3 questions right there. You can combine several thoughts into one sentence, but you will need to come down there to class comment and add your comment, and have at least a 3-sentence answer in this forum. And then you can click down here. It looks at the bottom where it says see everybody else's responses, and find 2 people who have responded and or have also answered that question, and then you need to respond to them. Again, just a reminder to grab the critical thinking questions from the front of the classroom and look through some of those questions to see if you can kind of ask a deep question to somebody that answered on the forum, because that is really good. I like that. Once you do that, you can complete this last assignment right here, which is just 1 page, and it's talking about entering and conquering the promised land. And basically, I just want you to explain what's going on at these little triangles and these dots. You'll say, what is that dot? So this one right here, Joshua 8, 30 to 35. I'll show you. It's how the Israelites are defeating Ai. And you're going to read right here, the Lord renewed his covenant in front of Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. All right, so what I would write right here is Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim at these 2 places. Those are the 2 mountains. So there's Mount Ebal, there's Mount Gerizim, and God renewed his covenant right at those 2 mountains. And Joshua read the law. That's what you would write right in there. because that's what's going on. One group stood in front of Mount Gerizim, the other stood in front of Mount Ebal. And they renewed the Lord's covenant. So do the same thing for these boxes, and you'll be done with that assignment. And that's it. On day 4, which is Friday or Thursday for 5th period, when you come into class, I'll give you a few minutes to reflect on what you've learned by completing an 8-sentence prayer, and then you'll have Heartness. And this week in Heartness, we are going to be around the big table, so that's going to be great. There is a chance that you may be doing Heartness before you're done with some of these, because some of you are going to do Heartness on day 3, and the other half of you are going to do Heartness on day 4. That's fine. Once you get through with the memory verse, the reading assignment, and the video, you should be well prepared enough to have a good Heartness discussion. All right, so do these first 2 on the first day, do this one on the second day, and you should be good to have that Heartness discussion. Enjoy learning about Joshua.